Chapter 8. On the Shortness of Life.
I need a stout heart to hear without flinching this din of battle which sounds roundabout, and all would rightly think me mad if, when greybeards and women were heaping up rocks for the fortifications, when the armour-clad youths inside the gates were awaiting, or even demanding, the order for a sally, when the spears of the foe men were quivering in our gates, and the very ground was rocking with mines and subterranean passages. I say, they would rightly think me mad if I were to sit idle, putting such petty poses as this. What you have not lost, you have. But you have not lost any horns. Therefore you have horns, or other tricks constructed after the model of this piece of sheer silliness, and yet I may well seem in your eyes no less mad if I spend my energies on that sort of thing, for even now I am in a state of siege. And yet, in the former case, it would be merely a peril from the outside that threatened me, and a wall that sundered me from the foe. As it is now, death-dealing perils are in my very presence. I have no time for such nonsense. A mighty undertaking is on my hands. What am I to do? Death is on my trail, and life is fleeting away. Teach me something with which to face these troubles. Bring it to pass that I shall cease trying to escape from death, and that life may cease to escape from me. Give me courage to meet hardships. Make me calm in the face of the unavoidable. Relax the straitened limits of the time which is allotted me. Show me that the good in life does not depend upon life's length, but upon the use we make of it. Also, that it is possible, or rather usual, for a man who has lived long to have lived too little. Say to me when I lie down to sleep, you may not wake again, and when I have waked, you may not go to sleep again. Say to me when I go forth from my house, you may not return, and when I return, you may never go forth again. You are mistaken if you think that only on an ocean voyage there is a very slight space between life and death. No, the distance between is just as narrow everywhere. It is not everywhere that death shows himself so near at hand, yet everywhere he is as near at hand.
We all seem to think that we will live forever. People have been told that they will die. They have seen others die, have no proof anyone has ever escaped death, but still show through their actions that they have no doubt that they will be the first to live forever. It is one of our shared madnesses. We do this because we fear death, even though it is an external and as natural an event as birth. We did not fear birth because we were nothing before being born. We should not fear death because we become nothing after we die. Why should we fear something which puts us beyond the reach of any harm or any need? We fear death because we have not yet learned how to live properly. Once we do, we will realize that how we live, not for how long we live, is what truly matters. We make our lives long or short by how we use our time. A life of limited years spent wisely, possessing tranquility of mind, living in accordance with nature, is infinitely preferable to a long one wasted by a fool. We must realize this and start out for the good life with all haste. We must set out at this very moment. We have already wasted much of the day and have a long and arduous journey to make before nightfall.
It is not that we have a short space of time, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and it has been given in sufficiently generous measure to allow the accomplishment of the very greatest things if the whole of it is well invested. But when it is squandered in luxury and carelessness, when it is devoted to no good end, forced at last by the ultimate necessity, we perceive that it has passed away before we were aware that it was passing. So it is. The life we receive is not short, but we make it so, nor do we have any lack of it, but are wasteful of it. Just as great and princely wealth is scattered in a moment when it comes into the hands of a bad owner, while wealth, however limited, if it is entrusted to a good guardian, increases by use, so our life is amply long for him who orders it properly.
We waste ourselves in so many ways, and prioritize the wasting, sacrificing everything else for it. We are possessed by greed, lust, ambition, or nihilism. We chase after our own achievement, or spend ourselves supporting the achievement of others. We are made anxious by both success and failure. We do all of this without doing the most important things first. We must learn the fundamentals of life.
Why do we complain of nature? She has shown herself kindly. Life, if you know how to use it, is long. But one man is possessed by an avarice that is insatiable, another by a toilsome devotion to tasks that are useless. One man is besotted with wine, another is paralyzed by sloth. One man is exhausted by an ambition that always hangs upon the decision of others. Another, driven on by the greed of the trader, is led over all lands and all seas by the hope of gain. Some are tormented by a passion for war, and are always either bent upon inflicting danger upon others or concerned about their own. Some there are who are worn out by voluntary servitude in a thankless attendance upon the great. Many are kept busy either in the pursuit of other men's fortune or in complaining of their own. Many, following no fixed aim, shifting and inconstant and dissatisfied, are plunged by their fickleness into plans that are ever new. Some have no fixed principle by which to direct their course, but fate takes them unawares while they loll and yawn. So surely does it happen that I cannot doubt the truth of that utterance which the greatest of poets delivered with all the seeming of an oracle. The part of life we really live is small.
We waste our lives because we are confused about what is actually valuable. We value money and land, which are worthless, but waste time, which is the only thing we own. Land and money come and go with the whim of fortune, but time can never be regained when lost or repaid when given. We are prone to so freely dispose of our time that even those who live 100 years will have wasted almost every day and every hour of it.
Though all the brilliant intellects of the ages were to concentrate upon this one theme, never could they adequately express their wonder at this dense darkness of the human mind. Men do not suffer anyone to seize their estates, and they rush to stones and arms. If there is even the slightest dispute about the limit of their lands, yet they allow others to trespass upon their life. Nay, they themselves even lead in those who will eventually possess it. No one is to be found who is willing to distribute his money, yet among how many does each one of us distribute his life? In guarding their fortune, men are often close-fisted, yet, when it comes to the matter of wasting time, in the case of the one thing in which it is right to be miserly, they show themselves most prodigal. And so I should like to lay hold upon someone from the company of older men and say, I see that you have reached the farthest limit of human life. You are pressing hard upon your 100th year, or are even beyond it. Come now, recall your life and make a reckoning. Consider how much of your time was taken up with a moneylender, how much with a mistress, how much with a patron, how much with a client, how much in wrangling with your wife, how much in punishing your slaves, how much in rushing about the city on social duties. Add the diseases which we have caused by our own acts. Add, too, the time that has lain idle and unused. You will see that you have fewer years to your credit than you count. Look back in memory and consider when you ever had a fixed plan, how few days have passed as you had intended, when you were ever at your own disposal, when your face ever wore its natural expression, when your mind was ever unperturbed. What work you have achieved in so long a life. How many have robbed you of life when you were not aware of what you were losing? How much was taken up in useless sorrow, in foolish joy, in greedy desire, in the allurements of society? How little of yourself was left to you? You will perceive that you are dying before your season.
What should we spend our precious time on then? On learning to live and learning to die. What does that look like in practice? Commit to becoming wise and learning philosophy. Spend your time with the wise who will teach you, not distracting yourself with politics or social media or porn. Detach yourself from the parts of life that do not matter and replace them with the things that matter the most. Do philosophy first. Make it your priority, for without it, you have little hope of doing the rest of your life properly. We are far behind in our studies, and our final exam could be at any moment. Luckily for us, fortune has chosen to make all the wisdom of the ages available to us, and given us many wise people to take as teachers, if only we get our priorities straight.
Of all men, they alone are at leisure who take time for philosophy. They alone really live. For they are not content to be good guardians of their own lifetime only. They annex every age to their own. All the years that have gone before them are an addition to their store. Unless we are most ungrateful, all those men, glorious fashioners of holy thoughts, were born for us. For us, they have prepared a way of life. By other men's labours, we are led to the sight of things most beautiful that have been wrested from darkness and brought into light. From no age are we shut out. We have access to all ages. And if it is our wish, by greatness of mind, to pass beyond the narrow limits of human weakness, there is a great stretch of time through which we may roam. We may argue with Socrates, we may doubt with Carneades, find peace with Epicurus, overcome human nature with the Stoics, exceed it with the Cynics. Since nature allows us to enter into fellowship with every age, why should we not turn from this paltry and fleeting span of time and surrender ourselves with all our soul to the past, which is boundless, which is eternal, which we share with our betters?
Avoid unwholesome things. Another useful way to think about this is through the concept of wholesome and unwholesome things and places.
For just as pestilential places assail even the strongest constitution, so there are some places which are also unwholesome for a healthy mind which is not yet quite sound, though recovering from its ailment. I disagree with those who strike out into the midst of the billows and, welcoming a stormy existence, wrestle daily in hardihood of soul with life's problems. The wise man will endure all that, but will not choose it. He will prefer to be at peace rather than at war. It helps little to have cast out your own faults if you must quarrel with those of others.
We are just starting down the road of recovery, so it is important to be aware of the many distractions and temptations that surround us. To stay on this path, we must avoid environments and individuals that might, whether intentionally or not, lure us away from our virtuous goals. This includes being selective about the information we consume. Much of what is found in books, sports, television, and particularly in the realms of social media, politics, and pornography, is designed to stir our passions and distract us from meaningful contemplation. In the modern world, we are increasingly drawn into parasocial relationships, one-sided interactions where we might find ourselves spending more time with influencers, politicians, or podcast hosts than with actual people in our lives. Interestingly, the Stoics were ahead of their time in embracing a form of this concept. They cultivated relationships, albeit one-sided, with the greatest minds of the past. This is an approach we would do well to emulate, choosing our mentors wisely and ensuring that our digital interactions enrich rather than detract from our pursuit of virtue. Thinking about death.
Do you, however, always think on death in order that you may never fear it?
The fear of our own death is the ultimate power that fortune holds over us. It is our only real adversary. If we rise to its challenge and conquer it, we will free ourselves from the problems of life. And if we do not, we will never truly find freedom, no matter what else we do. To the Stoics, if the threat of death or of being killed prevents you from doing what you know is right, you are not free.
Think on death. In saying this, he bids us think on freedom. He who has learned to die has unlearned slavery. He is above any external power, or, at any rate, he is beyond it. What terrors have prisons and bonds and bars for him? His way out is clear. There is only one chain which binds us to life, and that is the love of life. The chain may not be cast off, but it may be rubbed away, so that when necessity shall demand, nothing may retard or hinder us from being ready to do at once that which at some time we are bound to do.
Too strong a love of life compromises our values, and courage towards death fortifies them. There are many things we ought not do even under mortal threat, but that we will if we incorrectly value our living over our living well. We ought not kill, betray, bear false witness, or sacrifice our freedom. We should walk the path of virtue, even onto the gallows. We must remember not only that our lives could end today, but that the lives of our family and friends could as well. Fortune is a monster, and will seek to bring down the person who has escaped her power by assaulting their loved ones. We must show the same courage with others as we do with ourselves, which can be an even greater challenge.
Therefore, let us continually think as much about our own mortality as about that of all those we love. In former days I ought to have said, "My friend Serenus is younger than I, but what does that matter? He would naturally die after me, but he may precede me." It was just because I did not do this that I was unprepared when fortune dealt me the sudden blow. Now is the time for you to reflect, not only that all things are mortal, but also that their mortality is subject to no fixed law. Whatever can happen at any time can happen today.
Finish your life every day.
There is indeed a limit fixed for us just where the remorseless law of fate has fixed it, but none of us knows how near he is to this limit. Therefore, let us so order our minds as if we had come to the very end. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's account every day. The greatest flaw in life is that it is always imperfect, and that a certain part of it is postponed. One who daily puts the finishing touches to his life is never in want of time. And yet, from this want arise fear and a craving for the future which eats away the mind. There is nothing more wretched than worry over the outcome of future events. As to the amount or the nature of that which remains, our troubled minds are set aflutter with unaccountable fear. Therefore, my dear Lucilius, begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life. He who has thus prepared himself, he whose daily life has been a rounded whole, is easy in his mind. But those who live for hope alone find that the immediate future always slips from their grasp, and that greed steals along in its place, and the fear of death, a curse which lays a curse upon everything else.
We must confront the inevitability of death and begin to live each day as if it were our last. We must stop deferring life to an uncertain future, a habit that only breeds fear and longing, overshadowing our present. Stoic practice: read and write. If you want philosophy to change your life, immersing yourself in the original texts of the Stoic philosophers is essential. Gaining a first-hand understanding of their teachings is the foundation of this philosophical journey. After absorbing their wisdom, the next step is to reflect and write about these learnings, contemplating how they intertwine with your personal life experiences. As Seneca suggests, we should approach our study of Stoicism like a bee, moving from one source of wisdom to another, gathering the most suitable insights, and then synthesizing them into a unique, personal understanding.
And reading, I hold, is indispensable, primarily to keep me from being satisfied with myself alone, and besides, after I have learned what others have found out by their studies, to enable me to pass judgment on their discoveries and reflect upon discoveries that remain to be made. Reading nourishes the mind and refreshes it when it is wearied with study. Nevertheless, this refreshment is not obtained without study. We ought not to confine ourselves either to writing or to reading. The one, continuous writing, will cast a gloom over our strength and exhaust it. The other will make our strength flabby and watery. It is better to have recourse to them alternately, and to blend one with the other, so that the fruits of one's reading may be reduced to concrete form by the pen. We also, I say, ought to copy these bees and sift whatever we have gathered from a varied course of reading, for such things are better preserved if they are kept separate. Then, by applying the supervising care with which our nature has endowed us, in other words, our natural gifts, we should so blend those several flavors into one delicious compound that, even though it betrays its origin, yet it nevertheless is clearly a different thing from that whence it came. This is what we see nature doing in our own bodies, without any labor on our part. So it is with the food which nourishes our higher nature. We should see to it that whatever we have absorbed should not be allowed to remain unchanged, or it will be no part of us. We must digest it. Otherwise it will merely enter the memory and not the reasoning power.
To truly benefit from Stoicism, it is not enough to merely understand its philosophy. We must integrate it deeply into our thought processes. This requires a two-pronged approach, reading and writing. Begin by nourishing your mind with the writings of the great Stoic thinkers. Then engage in reflective writing, integrating their philosophies with your personal experiences. A recommended reading sequence would be to start with Seneca's Letters from a Stoic. Then progress to his other essays, along with Epictetus's Discourses and the Enchiridion, culminating with Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. This progression is designed to build a solid foundation in Stoic principles, starting with the more accessible texts and gradually moving to the more complex and esoteric works. This structured approach will help you develop a comprehensive and nuanced understanding of Stoicism. Stoic practice. Not even the next hour is guaranteed. In addition to fortifying us against the worst that can happen to ourselves and our loved ones, thinking about death has another important function to the Stoic. It reminds us that this very hour could be our last.
We cannot reckon on tonight, nay, I have allowed too long a delay. We cannot reckon on this hour.
By contemplating and remembering that not even the next hour is guaranteed, we can learn to stop wasting our lives. We should try to remember this at all times, so we can manage to think of it a few times each day. The things we are doing at this moment could be some of the last things we ever do. Make sure you spend these moments well. Do not waste them distracted by something unimportant or frustrated about something outside your control. Practice philosophy now. Be wise and good and kind now. Possess tranquility of mind now. Try to make this last hour the most virtuously beautiful hour of your life, and then, if fortune sees fit to lend you another, try to live that one even better. That is how a Stoic builds the best life possible. Focusing on the next hour rather than a longer period of time is vital, because its brevity compels us to apply the dichotomy of control in this moment, concentrating solely on what lies within our power here and now. Longer intervals like a month, a week, or even a day offer too much leeway. In such a short span as an hour, we do not have the luxury to organize our affairs, express our deepest feelings to loved ones, or indulge in bucket list fantasies. Our only option is to practice wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage in our current situation, with the people around us and in our thoughts right now. This is how a Stoic lives every hour well.